Hey everybody, and welcome to another Chairman of the Board ranking video. This is where I take a look at the last 5 new to me board games that I've played, and I rank and review them in order of preference. Now, just to give this episode a bit more context, all of these games are high quality, none of them are bad at all. There are just slight little things that make me prefer some over the others. So even number 5 here is actually very good. But before I get started on the list, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer. And if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 5, I have Ironwood. Now this is a 2-player only asymmetric game where one player is taking control of this kind of woodland faction and the other one this kind of iron or metal style faction, and you both have different objectives, but you are competing for those objectives on the same board, trying to block each other off and fight each other, and so on. So the woodland objective is to try and kind of fight your way through the woods to find these particular locations based on this deck of cards, expose this totem, and then use your troops to kind of carry that totem off to the edge of the board. And you're trying to do that 3 times. And the iron, or the iron characters are trying to build these forges on the edges of the board by getting troops there, building a foundation, and then turning it into a forge. Now, the way that the board is laid out is very interesting because the woodland characters can only do that, walk through the woodland areas, and the iron characters can move through the mountains, but you kind of have to cross each other's path to get to where you want to go. And you're playing these combat cards in order to fight your opponent. The combat system is pretty cool. It's a little bit swingy at times. Basically, you are weighing up the strength of your troops. You can add these cards blindly if you want to in a kind of a simultaneous bidding mechanism. You're competing against your defense value, your attack value, removing troops if you have any overspill, and then you are trying to compete for your dominance, what it's called. So each troop has a dominance value. Whoever has the strongest force remaining will either kind of force them away, or your opponent away, or will of course completely eliminate them from the board entirely. And what I did like about this game is the fact that your most powerful combat cards are generally your most powerful action cards. So it kind of reminded me of a game like War of the Ring, where you need to be careful about how you use them, because you want to be making sure that you have the best actions, but also still winning a fair amount of those combats to keep your presence on the board. And all in all, this is a very dynamic game. It can feel a little bit plodding to begin with because you are building up a bit of a force, a bit of an infrastructure, and you're not really achieving much. So it does have some moments when you are grinding to a halt. But there are some cool elements of surprise and some cool little moves you can do, as these cards have clearly been very carefully thought out and well balanced. And I suppose my biggest taking point from this game is how impressed I was with how digestible the rule set is, despite it being asymmetric. So one of my biggest kind of fears of these styles of games is that it's going to be a massive nightmare to teach because you are teaching 2 separate games with 2 different objectives. But because those objectives are kind of anchored to the core foundation of the game really easily or logically, then it's actually quite easy for each player to understand what they're trying to do, because the 2 different ways of winning of each faction make sense, and they're actually not too much of a deviation from each other, despite being so different, if that makes sense. So yeah, really impressed with how condensed this game is, with how it functions. The production value is absolutely insane, and not only is it gorgeous to look at, I love this unique style of artwork, this kind of realistic cartoon, but the actual physical components are great as well, because all of the woodland faction, all their pieces are wood, and all the iron faction, all their pieces are metal, and these are high quality pieces that look fantastic on the board. So this is more of a personal taste thing. I can see this one doing extremely well when people get to play it. A lot of people who like games like like Root or kind of more card-driven, more dynamic style of games are going to really enjoy this one. For me, the cards are a little bit too unpredictable. You can't really understand what the other player is capable of unless you play this dozens of times. And also the combat is a little bit too, again, too many aha moments rather than being meticulously thought out, which is, again, no fault of the game, it's just my personal taste. I like a little bit more autonomy about who's going to win those combats and why. But still, very impressive design. Maybe a little bit too long for what I want for a 2-player game, because you are looking at around an hour to play this one. I kind of like half an hour or less with 2-player only games. So I knew if I kept hold of this one, I would struggle to get it to the table. But still, design pedigree is very high on this one. And if it's worth anything, my girlfriend liked this one way more than I do. She thoroughly enjoyed it, and actually she loved it. And her not being much of a gamer, you know, she's not played many games, I think that goes to show how easy these rules are to understand, considering it is fairly complex and asymmetric, but still she managed to grok the rules very quickly and start to enjoy the game very quickly as well. So again, more praise there. So that is Ironwood, a great game, but unfortunately not one for me. At number 4, I have Passtally. So this is an abstract strategy, kind of route building style game that is highly brain burnery, if that's a real word, where you are plotting out these tiles on this communal board. Each of these tiles has different routes on them, and you are trying to connect 2 of your little markers on the extremities of this grid by passing through those lines. The more tiles you pass through, the better, and also the higher those stacks are, the better again. So you're going to get more and more points if you kind of double up on yourself and go through the highest stacks. And it's a race to get to 50 points. Super dynamic of a game. You know, everything is changing at all times. One single placement can completely, you know, derail what you had in mind. And of course, you and your opponents are playing on that same board. So the cross-contamination is there. What might help you might completely throw your opponent's plans off, and so on. So I tend to like these styles of games where you're, you know, following lanes and routes and so on, connecting things together. This one has that in spades. It's really crunchy, as I said. My only issue is that it is highly AP prone, and also like you don't really have much to do when it's not your turn. You're just going to sit back and watch your opponent take their turn and take their optimal move, which can take some time because the board state can be quite intimidating and overwhelming. But still, the simplicity of the mechanisms is great because all you do is place a tile or move your markers. And you are looking at around half an hour to play this one, maybe a little bit longer if you have very meticulous players. But I think, despite me enjoying the experience and appreciating the game, I think the fun factor might be a little bit lacking. It's a little bit too zero-sum, a little bit too transparent on all the different variables. And of course there is actually an optimal placement out there, and it's just a matter of trying to find it, which is not the easiest thing to do. And again, it can be very AP prone and time consuming. So again, maybe a little bit too much downtime, a little bit too much scope to lose engagement with this one. Very attractive, but yeah, one that I'm not probably going to come back to much more. I feel like I've played this one as an experiment and had my fix, and I've probably going to move on from it from now. So that is Passtally at number 4. At number 3, I have Klink. Now this is a party-adjacent card game that, if I had to describe it, I would say is a hybrid between games like Cockroach Poker mixed with Cabo. Now this is certainly a contender for Surprise of the Year for me because I wasn't sure what to expect with it, but it was tremendous fun. So very simple mechanically. All you're going to do is you are going to draw 2 cards face down. You can choose to look at one of those cards and then decide whether you want to keep them for yourself as scoring or pass them on to another player. Now the objective is to score as few points as possible, but there are kind of twists on what you can do, because if you end up ever getting 2 of the same number, then those cards are going to cancel each other out and be worth nothing. So sometimes collecting a high number isn't bad, as long as you can get a duplicate and of course eliminate those scorings. Additionally, if you get a run of 3 cards, you can activate a special power which can completely mess with the other players, or of course kind of help your situation. This is a game where I kind of went in cold. It was like I was teaching this to 4 other players and I could just see that they weren't terribly interested. But by the end of it, we were all having a tremendous time, and I was highly impressed with how easy this was to explain and relay, but also how much fun is in that little box. So again, this could have gone one of 2 ways, because I really dislike games like Cockroach Poker. I think it's a terrible design. This one is just a complete, I don't know, a reworking of that kind of idea, but it adds a bit more game to it. And there are some wrinkles, because sometimes taking cards for yourself is, even if it's not necessarily the best, the best bunch of cards, it can be great because you are in the power seat for the next round and you can decide whether to keep the next cards rather than being at the mercy of the other players. Because of course, once it's gone around all the players and everybody's passed on those cards, then the last player is going to be forced to keep those cards. And as these scores start to become more and more apparent and people can see who's winning and who's losing, you can start to kind of conspire with each other and force that player who's winning to take those last cards, which again could be bad or could be good for them. So yeah, this one definitely going to be a forever keeper for me, because there's always going to be that kind of party situation where you've got kind of gamers on the periphery of the hobby who've played some games but not loads. This one's going to satisfy kind of muggles, but also more experienced gamers like myself, because there are layers here, but it is still built on that foundation of silliness and approachableness as well. And even though it does have a little bit of a kind of a spicy vibe to this one, because it is it's a little bit mean at times, it doesn't ever feel malicious, and it's just a real ruckus fun time. So that is Klink at number 3. At number 2, I have Middle Ages. So this is a super lightweight Euro, I'd call it, kind of an engine builder, as you are drafting these tiles in a king domino fashion, where each round there's tiles equal to the number of players plus 1 out there. These tiles have numbers on them, and the higher number you go on will mean that you're lower in initiative value for the next row that you're drafting from. So you can plan several turns ahead and try to get the exact tiles that you want. When you take these tiles, you're going to add them to your little board. You're going to activate the power of that particular tile, and then you're going to get money based on how many of those tiles that you've collected. Money being your points in this game. Now the powers are fairly interesting because they do different things based on, they might give you money based on different symbols in your entire kind of kingdom. Some of them might let you attack other players based on kind of how many tiles you have compared to some of their tiles, which is probably one of the most polarizing mechanisms in the game, because it can be a little bit destructive, because you can actually force people to remove tiles from their board, but there are ways you can rebuild them back up. You can increase your engine further by increasing the yield of coins that each location gives you, and so on. So very condensed, almost gateway level engine building here, but the time frame and the time investment is very good in this game, I think. I think it's a gorgeous design. This is like my tailor-made style of artwork, kind of has this kind of stained glass medieval look that suits the game perfectly. The component quality is very high, everything fits together like a jigsaw puzzle, and yeah, all in all, it's just very enjoyable, quite charming. Again, be prepared for a bit of take that, but it's fast enough not to really make me feel disgruntled when it happens to me. And again, there are ways to mitigate that by rebuilding those buildings. You are encouraged to diversify, because you're going to lose points based on different tiles that you don't collect, but at the same time you are encouraged to stockpile some of the same tiles, because each time you do that, you're going to really build up the cash supply that you get at the end of each turn. So this is a reworking of a previous Marc Andre design. I think it was called Majesty for the Realm. I never played that one, so I'm not quite sure of the differences between the two. I think this one's been streamlined further from my understanding, but again, I've not played the original, so don't take that, or don't listen to me, I suppose. But yeah, this one, at the moment, everyone I've played it with has enjoyed it. It's super quick, doesn't outstay its welcome at all, and I could see this one being an evergreen, because it doesn't have any bells and whistles, it doesn't have any fiddly rules. You can play it in 30 minutes. The game of play that you're getting in about 30 minutes is high quality, and the drafting is tense, and there's just little wrinkles that you can play with to interact with your opponents and so on. So it's kind of been a quiet home run for me, really. I'm not going to say this is going to be top 5 of the year for me, but it might just breach the top 10, because it is a very pleasant game. So that is Middle Ages at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I have Rebirth. My oh my, is this game fantastic. So this is Knizia's latest kind of root building style game. Now, if you watch my channel, you might know that I'm a huge fan of that genre or style of game, especially when the Doctor is doing it. And this one kind of cherry picks bits from his other designs, like, you know, Havilandi, Babylonia, Through the Desert, all these games, but still manages to make it feel distinct, unique, and the quality of game design here is off the chart. So definitely going to be a contender, if not a surefire for Game of the Year for me at this point. It is, I was super impressed with everything this game has to offer. So gameplay wise, super simple. You have one tile in your hand. You can place it on the board on a matching space, or also a kind of a neutral space. You are trying to surround these castle areas. You know, the more of your pieces surrounding these castles, you'll claim that castle for yourself, which will be endgame scoring. And you're also trying to kind of build chains of the same symbol, because each time you do that, they're going to compound on each other and score you more and more points. You're trying to score majorities by populating these towns and cities. If you have the majority, you're going to score more points, and so on. And I love the way that there's so much to do, but you are pigeonholed to only being able to place one tile at a time. Now, for me, I really like that, because there are so many different options at all times that having one tile is enough to mull over. But I can see that some people might find that a little bit restrictive, because you might really want, say, a population tile to fill up that last space in the city, but you just can't draw one for, you know, just by pure luck. I understand that frustration, but there are so many other opportunities at all times that doesn't really bother me, and it's just something you have to kind of configure into your decision making and into your strategy. Now, there are other things going on at the same time through these kind of private or public objectives, depending on which map side you're playing on. So some might say, you know, control this particular castle, or, you know, be on the edge of the board 4 times, and so on. And so there's so many different conflicting things you're going for, and you just want to do everything all at once. And despite the board being so open to start with, you know, before you know it, everything is closed down and those opportunities will start to disappear. As I kind of alluded to before, there are 2 sides of the board here, which do offer quite a different experience. So you've got the, I think it's Scotland and Ireland, I believe. So the Scotland map is kind of the simpler of the 2, where a lot more of the spaces are more restrictive on what you can do. That's the one where you have your private objectives. I say the Ireland board is a bit more gamey, because there's a bit more free form on what you can do, and also the competitive nature is up a little bit more, because you are fighting for priority to get those objectives completed, to get more points. But for me, this is everything I want from a Knizia. I had high expectations, and this superseded those expectations, which is quite rare for me to say. And dare I say it, this game has replaced some other Knizias that I've had. Games like Havilandi, this one completely just destroys it. It cuts its legs from underneath that game. I mean, I really like Havilandi, but this one does everything Havilandi does, but way better. And also games like Samurai, it kind of reminds me of, as well as games like Babylonia, of course. So this one for me is like S-tier Knizia, like the best of the best. This is up there with the Babylonias. This is up there with the Raz. It is that good of a design. And as I said, probably going to be my game of the year. Could not recommend this one enough if you like the style of games that I do. So that is Rebirth. So happy to have this in my collection. This is like the best of the best at number 1. So there we have it. That concludes the video. Again, high standard of games here, from Ironwood up to Rebirth, all solid designs, and in fact tremendous designs. If you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel, and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.